I'd like to welcome everyone to our Sunday service. My name is Devashi. This is my wife, Maria. I'd especially like to welcome our guests and visitors to the Expanding Light. We have a couple of programs this weekend, How to Spiritualize Your Marriage, and also Art for Spiritual Growth. And one more welcome, I'd like to welcome 3 of our Ananda monks who are visiting from India, Jamal, Steve, and Jayadar. We're very, very happy to have you here for a little bit. This week's topic, from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. The law is perfected in love. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, we read, "The law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." Grace means the power to rise spiritually. Truth means the experience of divine realities, not the application in the outer world of that inner experience. Divine love is the soul's experience of oneness with God. Kindness is the human manifestation of that love. Grace is deeper than mere kindness. Wisdom is a divine experience. Justice to all is a human law, though divinely inspired. It follows as a consequence of the experience of wisdom. Truth goes deeper than mere justice. While following the law, we should strive always to trace it back to its origins in the vision of God. Therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita urges the devotee not to be satisfied with spiritual precepts alone, but to go beyond them to the direct inner experience of truth. In the 18th chapter of that great scripture, he says, "Nay, but once more take my last word, my utmost meaning have. Precious thou art to me, right will beloved. Listen, I tell thee for thy comfort this. Give me thy heart, adore me, serve me, cling in faith and love and reverence to me. So shalt thou come to me, I promise true, for thou art sweet to me. And let go those rites and writ duties. Fly to me alone. Make me thy single refuge. I will free thy soul from all its sins. Be of good cheer." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. I'd like to begin by reading from Whispers from Eternity, a book of poems and prayers by Paramahansa Yogananda. Nothing can steal my love for thee. No loud or whispered words of prayer shall steal away my love. With the soul's unspoken language, I will express my hunger for thee. Thy voice is silence, and through my silence, thou must speak to me and tell me, thou hast loved me always, though I knew it not. I have a confession to make. I have a certain weakness. Well, I have many. But I'll only share with you one this morning, so don't worry. We won't be here all day. And the weakness is this. For some inexplicable reason, I really like to drive a clean car. I don't know why, but there it is. And living as we do out in the country with a lot of dusty roads in the summer and muddy roads in the winter, it can be a bit of a challenge. And so some months ago, I was in town running errands in my dusty little car. And I thought, I know what, I'm going to take my car to the car wash. Yay. And so I drove into the car wash, and I like to use those do-it-yourself so I can get, the soapy water and the brush and, really clean it real good. And Devarshi knows about this weakness. And so he very kindly makes sure there is always a pile of change in a certain compartment in our car. And so I drove it in with full confidence that there is going to be the 6 quarters. That is the cost of washing. And I pulled in and I opened up the little container, and there was a pile of change. And I started counting 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 3 quarter, 4, 5, and that's it. And I looked around in the compartment, and there was no other quarter. And then I thought, okay, I have change in my wallet. I'm going to look in my wallet. And I looked in my wallet, and I poked my finger everywhere, and I zipped out all the compartments. No quarter. And I thought, well, no problem. It's going to be in the glove compartment. I looked in the glove compartment, and then I looked under the seats. And then I took out the mats, and I looked under the mats. And then I opened up the trunk, and I looked in the trunk. And I searched all my pockets, and I was 1 quarter short. And there I was in my dusty little car, in the car wash, and I was 1 quarter short. And so I decided I'm going to look everywhere one more time. And I went through the whole cycle again, and in the words of Winnie the Pooh, the more I looked, the less it was there. And I felt this determination rise within me. It was Maria against the car wash. I was bound and determined to wash my car that day, and it was bound and determined not to let me. And so this went on for a while, and then I realized no matter how hard I looked, I still was 1 quarter short. And so I got in my little car, my dusty little Honda, and I closed the door. But I didn't drive away. I just sat there quietly for a minute. And then I said, look, I know this is very, very silly, but I really want to wash my car today. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to look in my wallet one more time. And if it's okay with you, would you please put a quarter in there? And so I reached over, and I looked in my wallet one more time, and there it was. Now, it could be that it was always there, and I just didn't see it. But I prefer to think that it was put there by my Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says so beautifully, "Those who worship me, I correct their mistakes, and I make good their deficiencies. I cover their shortfall." And so I washed the car, and I drove back to Ananda. And as I was driving, I noticed that the windshield was blurry. And I thought it must be the water from the car wash beating up on the windshield. But it wasn't. The windshield was dry. My eyes were wet. So our topic this morning is divine love. The law is perfected in divine love. And so the law said, lady, the car wash is 6 quarters. You only have 5. Tough luck. But the divine love said, I'll cover your shortfall. Here is the quarter. Now we need divine law. Even in our little household, we need divine law and order. The meals need to be cooked. The dishes need to be done. The trash needs to be taken out every Wednesday. And that's just a little household of two. Multiply that by 100 gazillion billion times, and you get the universe, which is run by Divine Mother, and she needs the law and order to run it. And we need the law and order so that we can know what's right and what's wrong. There is a beautiful line in the Festival of Light, which we will celebrate later this morning. And please listen to the whole festival carefully, because every time I do, I find something new to teach and inspire me. And that line says, Lord, our beloved, when we need you, you descend. Our human griefs, your love alone can mend. Where do our human griefs come from? They come from breaking the law. They come from being out of covenant in some way with the divine law. Whether we know it or not, in some way we're out of harmony. And then the divine love says, I will heal your griefs, which you have incurred by breaking the divine law. So, we see in our story that I just told you this morning, we see from the words of Krishna that God has put in effect a certain law that governs the universe. But he didn't leave it there. And if he had, we would be in very, very deep trouble, all of us. And so he also put in the principle of divine love. But when you think about the story that I told, you see how marvelously integrated the two are. In the words of Jesus Christ, when he was accused of breaking the Sabbath, or maybe not following the scriptures as they were interpreted back then, he said, the house divided cannot stand, meaning I'm not breaking the law, you just don't understand it fully. And so God does not contradict himself either. It's not like he said, car wash is 6 quarters for everybody, but for you, Maria, it's only 5. No, it was, the divine law is impartial, it is fair, and it does not discriminate. It's very politically correct that way. And so, to supplant that divine law, Krishna says, if you love me, if you put my life, if you put your life into my care, I'll cover your shortfall. I'll provide for you. And so he does. But we have to understand there is another principle in place. That quarter had to come from somewhere. Even if it was manifested out of the thin air, it had to come from somewhere and plunk itself into my wallet. And that's where the second principle of God comes. There is a beautiful, beautiful letter by Paramahansa Yogananda that he wrote to one of his disciples who was having a hard time. It happens. And the letter begins, you must never lose courage. And then he goes on to say other things, and then he says, I will never give up my job about you. And then he says, listen to this, and I will give you lots of my good karma so you can pull through. That's where the quarter came from. That's where our help comes from. It comes from the bank of the gurus. When a great soul like Yogananda, or like Krishna, or any of our line of gurus, incarnate on earth, every action they perform, the karma that is generated by that action on behalf of mankind is deposited, you might say, in a divine bank of the spiritual family that we're all a part of. Why? Because it's not performed with the sense of ego. Whenever we do something good, as long as we think and feel that it is us who is acting, we also generate good karma. And it goes into our teeny little bank account the bank of me, and between the deposits and withdrawals in my bank, I know there is nothing. But whenever I'm acting with the thought of God is doing it through me, that good act, that good karma, that spiritual wealth gets deposited into the bank of the gurus. And this is old money. It started with Babaji, and Lahiri Mahashaya put some good wealth in there, and Sri Yukteswar, and Paramahansa Yogananda, and Swamiji, and all of us. Anytime we serve, we act with the thought of God is doing this through me, we make ongoing deposits of spiritual wealth into the bank for everybody to draw upon in time of need. This is one of the most marvelous things about belonging to a spiritual family. We may not have much materially. In fact, we don't. I'm looking at our monks in India who just came from digging ditches in our new community in Pune. And God only knows how they're building that community, with what kind of financial support. But it's happening. Why? Because it's backed by incredible spiritual wealth. In terms of spiritual wealth, this family is one of the most richest that's on earth. We have incredible amount of spiritual wealth and help available to us at any time, for everybody. There is plenty for everyone. Don't ever feel that there is not enough. There is more than we will know what to do with. All we need to do is ask for it, and it will be given to us. Our shortfalls will be covered. For little things like the car wash, for big things like overcoming karmic obstacles and illnesses and whatever happens to come across our way, it will be there. There is enough. Now, why did Krishna say that in the Bhagavad Gita? For those who worship me, I will take care of them. Why did Yogananda say, I will never give up my job about you, I will help you out? What is it that prompts the great ones to love us so much? Do we deserve it? There is a beautiful letter that Swami Kriyananda wrote recently. It wasn't even a letter, it was a note. It was a note written in the middle of the night in some hotel room where he was staying. He woke up feeling overwhelmed with God's bliss in the middle of the night. And he wanted to write a message to all of us. And he didn't even have a pen and paper. So he looked around his room and there was a little doily under a glass. So he took the doily and he wrote the message. Just a few words. And a part of that message was, the more bliss I feel, the more I realize how utterly lovable everyone is. This is so sweet. The more bliss I feel, bliss is God, meaning the more he is in God, the more he feels what God feels for us. Love. The more I feel how utterly lovable everyone is. Now, he could have said, the more I'm with God, the more I see what's wrong with all of you. And he probably sees that too. But it was not worth the mention. He just said, this is what God feels for you guys. This is what God feels for you. Utterly lovable. Now, not every religion emphasizes that. And for one, I'm extremely grateful for the message of our masters, that they have come to tell us of God's love and to demonstrate it and to show it to us so that we can partake of it. But even world big religions, they don't talk about that. Some years ago, Devarsha and I were in Moscow, as in Russia, Moscow. helping to conduct a program for our devotees there, our meditation group. And we had a free day, and so the devotees decided to take us on a little tour. And they showed us some churches inside the Kremlin. Now, the Kremlin, most of us know, is just a bunch of government buildings. That's where the central government is located. But there are also some old churches in there, and they're open for tourists, and they're really beautiful, pretty, just a beautiful architecture. And I remember we walked into one little chapel, and from the outside it was just really lovely. Very graceful lines, just uplifted your spirit. But as we walked in, I just felt a little out of sorts. And I looked around, and the altar was beautiful, and it was clean, it was beautifully restored. But as my gaze followed the arch, I looked up and I looked up, and at the very top of the cupola, there was a big life-size icon of what they think is Christ. It's not what I think Christ looks like. He did not look pleased. He had this big frown, and he was staring right down at me. It would be just looking, standing right here, and there is this big life-size face frowning over you. And it was like saying, and I thought, my gosh, these people, they went from a repressive religion straight to a repressive regime without any pause. He really looked like a KGB colonel dressed up in robes. That's not the Christ that Yogananda came to tell us about. That's not the Christ that's on our altar. And so the God that we worship, we of course got out of there pretty quickly. And I was very, very grateful again for the gift of understanding of the principle of divine love that supersedes divine law. It works in harmony with it, but it is above the law. And whenever we break the law, we have the appeal of divine love to go to. Now, back to my little story of the car wash. I want to make something very clear so that there is no misunderstanding. I don't want us to feel that because I was given a quarter that morning, I have God in my pocket. As Yogananda Ji said, and Swami Kriyananda also said, God is not some divine slave waiting to do your bidding. And that was a very silly little wish. But I have prayed before, and I had prayed since very, very, very hard on occasion for situations that were literally life and death in my own life and in the lives of those who were very dear to me, who I loved more than my own life. And sometimes those prayers were answered, and sometimes they weren't. Or I should say, they were not answered in the way I wanted them to be. And so I want to make something very clear. It's not the things that we get. It's not the wishes that come true that we pray for that's important. It's not what brought tears to my eyes as I was driving away, not because I could clean my car. It was because God made himself appear to me. I became aware of his sweet presence in such a little way, in such an inconsequential little situation. And that's what's so precious about our path, about our understanding of the path, and about what we're really trying to achieve. It's not to get our wishes fulfilled. It's not to get our desires fulfilled. It's not even to get our prayers answered. It's just to know that God is so immediate and so present in our lives. There is a beautiful story we read in the New Path by Swami Kriyananda. It's a story about Master. We all read it, and I'd like to finish with it today. It's the story of the shortbread. It says, Master talks about it in one of his recorded talks. And he tells it pretty much the way Swamiji tells it, except that he says something else at the end, and I'll get to it. There was this little store, little bakery that sold Scottish shortbread near where Yogananda used to live in Southern California. And as he would go out on a drive sometime, he would stop and get some shortbread as a treat for his loved ones. And this one day he was out for a drive. He had a driver and a few people with him. And they were passing the store, and he said, well, let's stop and get some shortbread as a treat. And so the car stopped, and he sent somebody out, and the disciple came back empty-handed. And she said, sir, they were out. Now, for any of us, it just happens every day. We want something, it's denied, we move on, we don't think twice about it. But for Yogananda, such was his attunement and complete integration, you might say, with the divine will, that even to have this little discrepancy between a little wish and the denial of that wish, that was like a jolt. And before he could even say, Divine Mother, what's up? He says, and now I'll revert to his recorded talk, to his words. He said there was a light above that bakery, and the proprietress came out running, holding a package, and said, here, I was saving it for somebody else. I'll bake them another batch. I want you to have it. And then Master said something. Said, I cried. I cried. His windshield was misting up. Why? Because God had revealed himself to him in such a sweet, quiet way. And that's what we're after. That awareness of God's presence through fulfilled wishes, through denied wishes, through unspoken silence, just a feeling of his presence. That's the highest law of all, knowing that he is there. I'd like to close with just a few lines from Master's poem. The poem is called I'm Here. Master says, someone beside me stood unseen and whispered to me, cool and clear, hello playmate, I am here. God bless you all.